Hey, Crossroads family. It's Pastor Chris here. Excited to give you a devotional for this morning. We just came back from a really fun family trip to Kentucky, where the Ark is, the real one. And it's my first question my son asked, is this the real one? How did they get it here? And I told him it floated there. And so it was a really sweet experience because we got to really, I was really humbled. You stand at kind of the foot of this massive boat and you remember the incredible moment where, just think about this for a second, Noah is minding his own business, just being faithful to what God's asked him to do for the last 500 years of his life. And then God shows up and is like, hey, I want you to build something that nobody has any idea about. Or why you're going to do it in the middle of a place where water doesn't make sense. And Noah's like, all right. And he just faithfully does it. And I want to give a little bit of context. If it's okay, I'm going to walk us through a really beautiful, I think, story of. So I want to, in Hebrews 11, let me flash to Hebrews 11. It gives us this idea of what Noah's faith was like. It says it was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God who warned him about things, listen, that had never happened before. So Noah's operating on a call from God that nobody else has ever seen and is wondering, okay, what does that look like? Because everybody's going to mock me at this moment. They're going to make fun because nobody's seen what's happening. And God just told Noah, hey, just trust me. And if you will just trust me, then you will, by faith, attain righteousness, and he does. And because of that, he not only attains righteousness for himself, but he saves his family, and he's able to execute the plan and the purpose that God has for his life. So in Genesis chapter 6, we see that the world's kind of gone haywire. And we have this moment, my son asked, when did people stop living to be 900 years old? Because we got to be introduced to Methuselah, who was 969 years old. Not the real one. He's gone now, but the animatronic one at the Ark. And so this moment is where that happens, right? Genesis chapter 6 is where God says that they're only mortal flesh. So in the future, the normal lifespan will be no longer than 120 years, which is interesting to me. This is kind of this paradigm shift from people living 6, 7, 8, 900 years to people having more of a short time. So let me just pause and remind you that life is short, that it's brief, that you have to remember that if you're here for a reason or purpose. And because of that, you should be pursuing God. So if you're sitting in a moment right now where you're like, I'm not sure what to do next, then go, hey, God, what is it you have for me that maybe I'm missing, I'm not hearing, I'm not seeing, and then run in it. Like, understand that God is going to position you for exactly what he wants you to do. Even if right now you're looking and going, but nobody else is doing this, God, that's okay. Because he's called you to do it, nobody else to do it. He's equipped you for it, nobody else to do it. So even in Noah's confusion, I'm sure in that moment, he still was called to trust a God who had been only faithful to him to that point. And trust me, God has only been faithful to this point as well. And so we see that Noah finds favor with God, which is incredible. I love, Craig Rochelle has this quote that I love. He said, I don't want your talent to take you further than your character can keep you. And that quote has stuck with me. I don't want your talent to take you further than where your character can keep you. Now, why does that matter? Because God's called you to do something. He's given you a purpose and a calling on your life. But here's what I know to be true is that he's not going to position you for that until your character is ready for it. And so we have to take the time to sit in the presence of God and go, God, I don't have a clue right now, but I know that you're developing me. I don't know maybe why this pain entered my life, but I know that you're developing me. I know that you're preparing me for what is to come. So don't see the obstacle as the problem. See it as the opportunity that you have to grow because God's preparing you for what's to come. So Noah found favor. His character with God, it says, was blameless. He walked in close fellowship with God. So stay close to God. And I love he gives all these commands of how to build the ark. And man, it's wild. If you're able to just go to Kentucky and see it and just stand in the presence of God and go, man, how incredible is it that you gave this wisdom? And my son asked me this question, Dad, how did he know what to do? How did he know how to keep all of these animals? Because you walk through, you see like how they would have maintained all the different animals. And I said, because God gave Noah the wisdom he needed for that very moment. wisdom that nobody else at that day and age had at all. Because remember, Hebrews 11 says that Noah did something that nobody else had done to this point. So God will endow you with the wisdom you need to accomplish the task he set before you. You just are called to trust that when you walk in your calling, he's going to give you what you need. So Noah finds favor. He builds exactly what's been called of him to the letter of the law, if you will. It says that Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. And then the flood comes. And you can imagine, I have this picture in my office. You can imagine the chaos that ensued when water began to rise up from everywhere. Because remember, it's not just, I think sometimes you just think it was a heavy rain. And it's not, right? The scripture is clear that there were geysers coming out of the earth and that waters are rising from the oceans. And honestly, fun fact I learned, because I'm a nerd and I love to learn nerdy things. If the land of the earth was flat, the whole earth would be covered with 1.6 miles of water. That's how much water is on our earth, which blows my mind. With that in mind, the waters begin to rise and everything begins to sink around him. And you can imagine the panic and the chaos that Noah is hearing on the outside of the ark. But he knows that he has been called to do exactly what he's been called to do. And on the other side of that, he's been called to allow God's judgment to reign. Sometimes we try to step in and stop God's judgment where God's judgment needs to reign. Sometimes we need to allow people to fail because they need to see and feel, because it'll change who they are down the road. It'll change who they become. It'll change how they treat people. Think about what Noah came out of the ark. He came out different. He came out broken for the people that were around him. He came out going, I'm going to do everything in my power now to raise up a generation who loves and admires God, because I never want this to be their experience. And so it says Noah did everything he commanded. Noah did everything he commanded. He says it multiple times throughout this text. And then as everything passes away, I love this text in Genesis chapter 8, verse 1. Here's what it says. You ready? But God, what? Remembered Noah. And he remembered the promise that he made to him. He remembered the commitment and the covenant he made to him. Now, keep in mind, at this point, Noah had been stuck on a boat with a bunch of loud, crazy kids, animals, everything else for 150 days. 150 days of chaos. And Noah's going, God, you there? Like, are you still hearing me? Like, are you still out there? And God remembers Noah. He remembers his promise. He remembers his commitment, his covenant. And listen, some of us stuck in the middle of chaos and we're wondering, God, you still got me, yeah? Like everything kind of feels like it's kind of going crazy. But he's still looking at you. Listen, I need you to hear it this morning. God remembers you. He knows you. He calls you by name. You are his sheep. He is their shepherd. He will not forget you. And so even in those moments where it feels like, man, nobody is hearing me, nobody understands me, nobody cares, listen, you have a deep, loving Father who cares for you, who loves you, who's for you, who remembers you. Even in the 150 days of chaos, he's there. So I hope today that you will remember the beautiful promise of God to Noah, that even when he was called to do something, as Hebrews tells us, that nobody else had done, that God was faithful to him. He prepared him. He gave him the wisdom he needed. He was a man of character. And at the end of the day, God was with him. He remembered him. And it's a beautiful promise for us today as well. So I love you guys. Have a great day, whichever day this is. I hope it's the best day of your week, because I'm sure it will be. We'll see you guys next time.